Welcome to the Robotics Through Science Fiction podcast, where you can learn about artificial intelligence from robot movies, books, and stories. I'm Robin Murphy, and in this podcast, I'll review Artemis, Andy Weir's follow-up to The Martian. The science is as good as it was in The Martian, and it has realistic robots, so spend a few hours enjoying life on the moon. With his second book, Artemis, Andy Weir has established himself as the new Arthur C. Clarke, writing hard science fiction in a pleasant, digestible way. The series reviews versus the, "Oh my god, Andy Weir has another book, it must be so good," ones make it sound like the book's about a female Han Solo type in a lunar city, which doesn't sound that interesting. Why smugglers on the moon are science-y. Why smugglers on the moon? That poses the real fear that Artemis is a sophomore slump, that dreaded second novel that's a mistake or rushed to market. I know I certainly resisted reading Artemis because I didn't want to be disappointed. No worries. The function of the book is to explore all the aspects of a lunar city and how it would really work. The form of the book uses a lovable scamp of an engineering genius who got off track with the wrong boyfriend and is now a smuggler. It's the excuse to take us through the city's entire infrastructure as well as the political, corporate, and social organization, with a few observations about planetary economics and welding in a vacuum thrown in. So the plot is really secondary, which is the hallmark of hard sci-fi. If you read Arthur C. Clarke's A Fall of Moon Dust, you probably remember all the cool technology and fun facts about rescuing a vessel that is sunk into a moon crater, and none of the characters. I vaguely remember the astronomer who lived aboard a satellite so he could concentrate on his telescope, but not so much as a character, rather as a, I guess you might send up a person to live by themselves. In hard sci-fi, the characters and plot serve to get you through the hard science, rather than the science is there to be a realistic background for the nuanced character development and original plot. Is Jazz as likable and relatable as Mark Watley in The Martian? No, but she's entertaining enough, and her poor life choices don't distract from the science of what she's doing. And speaking of science, there are robots in Artemis. Yay! Robots with realistic morphology and autonomous capabilities. Yay! And indeed, the suspenseful action centers around blowing up robot mining equipment with the help of a small multi-limbed robot. Yay! Like the book, the highly realistic robots follow the form follows function principle, and it does this in two ways. The first way is literal. The morphology or shape of the robots literally depend on their function. The mining robots are basically large bulldozers, pretty much what terrestrial excavators for pit and strip mining look like now. The hull inspection bot, HIB, which Jazz calls Hibby, of course, is one of my favorite robots of all time. Its form follows its function of performing inspection and maintenance tasks outside the domes, minimizing the number of times people have to suit up and go EVA. So instead of a complex humanoid robot, Hibby is small with limbs that can act like claws to let it easily climb up the rungs that cross the domes. And it has a small arm for manipulating the environment. Arms are really important to do useful work. See my article in Science Robotics on why real space robotics like R2-D2 need arms. But Hibby can also move on the lunar soil and inside the dome, adapting the movements to her environment. The second way the robots follow the form follows function principle is in the control style. The robots aren't some form of artificial general intelligence, but instead their intelligence, as well as the way a person controls and interacts with the robot, depends on its function. The mining robots are built to autonomously harvest ore. They're not very bright, about the level of a sheep or a Roomba, but they don't require supervision for normal operations. A mining robot will plod along doing its job, but if it detects a problem, it alerts a human who can then teleoperate the robot in order to identify what the problem is, diagnose the cause, and the human will come up with a way to recover, also known in engineering as fault detection, identification, recovery, or FDIR. In the last century of engineering, it was straightforward to identify the problem, and the recovery was directly related. So it was kind of similar to a stimulus response behavior. We've got green, then go. Well, if X is broken, then do Y. Duh. But now systems are much more complex, and robots interact with the world. And the world can be the cause of a problem, like an off-road driver suddenly get height-centered on a rock. Therefore, even though a system is autonomous, there are times when the system needs to be easy for a person to step in and temporarily take over. As an aside, autonomous control tends to be optimistic, leading to what cognitive scientist David Woods dubbed Robin Murphy's law of autonomy, that an autonomous system will perform at a lower level of autonomy in the field than planned for. It's a variation of Murphy's law that whatever can go wrong will. In my research in field robotics, I emphasize that a robot's never 100% autonomous in the sense of being on its own, because there's always some interaction with a human to specify the mission, report the results to, or whatever, and because the robots will always encounter a problem that requires a human as a higher cognitive power to sort out. Anyway, back to Artemis. While the mining robots in Artemis illustrated how even an autonomous function involves robots, Hibby showed how a teleoperated function requires autonomy. No human in their right mind wants to have to tell Hibby how to climb the inspection runs studying the habitat dome. A human just wants to direct the robot to the desired dome inside of the hull and let the robot do the rest of it on its own. Would cowboys really prefer to tell a horse, left side hooves up, right side hooves down, or to let the horse do that part? In general, humans prefer, and it's more efficient to give high-level commands for routine operations such as return home, not teleoperate the robot. In theory, Hibby can be considered a teleoperated robot because it's being given directives by an operator, though those directives are often delegating a skill or action sequence to the robot. It's more like Hibby has intermittent autonomy, which is sometimes called semi-autonomy. Jazz and Hibby sometimes work together, with Jazz looking around through Hibby's sensors while Hibby continues to climb, which is the shared control flavor of semi-autonomy, and they sometimes take turns, where Jazz totally delegates to Hibby, Hibby performs the task, and then returns control to Jazz. This is the traded control flavor of semi-autonomy. Autonomy, semi-autonomy, Autonomy. The difference between autonomy and semi-autonomy just isn't clear in field robotics. The goal is for the robot to work, and there'll be a human involved in there somewhere, either to specify the work or help out. Any robot whose form doesn't permit human control will not be able to reliably perform its function. So, don't let the description of Artemis hold you back from reading it. Its function is hard science fiction, with its form being a slightly implausible plot. Sit back and enjoy life on the moon with robots as they show off well-designed morphology and variations of autonomy. And my recommendation is to get the audiobook. Rosario Dawson is excellent, and she applies her Batgirl and the Lego Batman movie voiceover chops to Artemis. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and the Robotics Through Science Fiction newsletter so you won't miss a thing.